Cheap Joe's Art Stuff. My name is Julie, and today on 2-Minute Art Tips, we're going to be doing something entirely different. Today I wanted to wish you guys an early happy Mother's Day and introduce you to a couple of people that are pretty special to me in my life. We have actually 3 generations of working artists and Cheap Joe's customers here today. We have my own mom, Carol, and then my daughter, Victoria. Maybe some people don't have this typically, but our family kind of has a legacy of art built within it. We have a long string of women artists that run through my family. It didn't just start with mom here. It started with her mom, Pauline, who was a very, very talented artist. And she was kind of a power woman who was before her time, sort of, I think, in many ways. Now, granted, as you know, if you're a woman and you're an artist, it's a terribly, terribly difficult profession to be in. You know, when you're a woman in the 30s, it was like that as well. So she wasn't a professional artist. She was a hairstylist by trade, but also a powerhouse in that she was her own salon owner and a business owner in the 30s when that was not a thing. But mom had an interesting background where my grandmother was very encouraging of mom's art all throughout.
No doubt, yeah.
Yeah, and I can say for sure that, like, of the successful, happy artists I've met, it comes from a strong background that starts in your home.
Yes.
You know. And mom has an interesting story about the painting that was in the hallway you were talking about the other day.
My mom painted in oil. That was the medium of the day. It was about all that was available. And she set up a painting in our hallway of a seascape and left the palette there, so she would go by whenever she had a minute and add a little something to it, and I'd go by and I would maybe take out what she put in and add something to it. So this was a joint venture, and it emerged as a kind of a happy cooperative accident, and we did joint projects on more than one occasion, one of them which was the nativity scene.
Yeah, I'll show you a picture of it here.
A large piece of masonite, and we did the nativity scene on it. We both worked on it day and into the night, as artists often do. It was in our yard for a number of years during Christmas, and eventually we gave it to a church, so heaven only knows where it is now. But
And so you had art material available to you largely, like your whole life.
I did.
Then you went, you did an art correspondence
I did.
school.
The old Draw Me, famous artist school out of Westport, I believe it was, the home base. And you worked at home. And then you sent your assignments off, and they were graded and sent back to you. And eventually you ended up with a diploma in commercial art. And you learn a lot about everything, but when you realize what commercial art is, it may not be as joyful as some avenues of art. So I didn't want to render refrigerators, so I didn't do that.
Yeah, but I grew up with your commercial art books.
The books, yeah.
Yeah, from her art school around, which were heavily process and technique oriented, so it had a lot of step-by-step about how to render, how to break down a complicated form, all that kind of stuff when I was a kid. And I remember they were ginormous books.
They were big.
They were huge.
Yeah.
Like,
You barely
the
lift
covers were this big, and you would, like, open
A
them.
red one, blue one, a yellow one, your primaries.
Yep, the primary colors, and they were awesome. I played with those a bunch and would lay on the floor and look at them because they were so huge. But but then, art kind of got sidelined for you in a way.
Yeah.
One
has to make a living.
Yes.
And so I did other things.
Yeah.
But I painted and drew when I had time. And later on, when I started doing more portraits, I did them in pastel because there was so little cleanup. You could walk away and leave it and you come back and it was as you left it. You didn't have to, your paints wouldn't dry out and your brushes wouldn't get ruined. So you
Right.
could.
And
you
the
could
cat wouldn't knock over solvent.
Well, they would walk through it, but
All the famous
was-
cats of our family.
we did that.
Did
yeah,
that,
and they'll
yeah.
have their signature in the paintings as well.
So basically, you worked in a law environment for a long, long
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah,
and even had a whole series of cartoons that were based on
on
law.
lawyers. Yeah,
Lawyer speak and terminology and
Yes.
all that kind of stuff. As many of you know, you guys already know me. Even though it was encouraged in my art, my father didn't think that a career in it was a good plan. He actively discouraged that whole thing, but being that I'm not as great of a listener as I am to talker, I chose to ignore that. So,
Starving artist. Here we
yeah,
are.
and here we are, But then we have another generation of budding artists here, which is my daughter Victoria. And she works in, several medias. She's had access to, material her whole life. And granted, her father is an artist as well. So we knew it ran in the genes, but, you never want to like push your kid through, a tunnel that they're not really interested in. But I remember distinctly the first time when I realized this, like, oh, this isn't us just shoving this down her throat. She's actually interested in this. Of course, she had material available to her because I was working for Cheap Joe's long before she was ever born. So she had her little, Crayola, little kid, easel and stuff. And she was working on a painting with, just paper and stuff like this. And she still was in like pull-ups, like little diapers and stuff. And she had been actively engaged with this thing for like 45 minutes, which for a small child was extremely odd. And I remember walking up to her and I was just like, well, is this finished? Are you ready to do something else? And she was just like, no. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And she was just like, hold on. And then she takes the painting down and she's looking at it and she turns it like 90 degrees and puts it back up and starts working on it again. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what? I mean, this is an extremely advanced kind of thing for an artist to do, when they're not even two, was completely floored me. So I remember being like, oh, okay, I know where your head is. So you do all kinds of different things. Tell me about, like, everybody what your favorite stuff is to do.
So I remember when I first started getting really interested in like one specific thing was you got all those Zentangle books that you like color and stuff like that. But then instead of like coloring in them, you just started like, I think you did like, you took two of them and put them together in one. So you just took ideas from both of them and like made them one, and I thought that was insanely cool. Mm-hmm. And I tried to do that, and that didn't work. But but then I just started kind of like taking all the ideas that were in all of them, kind of, and then making one. But that just ended up me just basically doing mandalas, and that was my big thing for a really long time. Then when I kind of got into high school and stuff, I was like, okay, I want to get to do something that is a little bit more realistic looking. So then I just started drawing eyes, and that didn't get good until about right now. So,
Yeah, well, you've been drawing more than eyes. There's a lot
Hands.
of figure study and hands and people, and you're branching out a whole lot more than you were. But it wasn't until I was like really, really nagging you that, like, if you want to get better at this, because you were extremely hard on yourself. That also runs in the family.
Yes, it is.
That you weren't progressing quickly enough and in a way that you felt was, worthy of your time. And I was telling you, well, the time will tell. You would just keep working on it and it will come, So we've got some pictures here of some of my mom's work as well as Victoria's. So there's all kinds of different things that you can see. So there's like pen and ink, and then there's pencil and all kinds of different stuff. We just wanted to encourage you that if you haven't thought about your mom this Mother's Day, make sure to give her a shout out and a call if she's far away. And if you aren't the person that has your mom around or have a great relationship with your mom, here is a big video hug from all of us who say sorry, because for us that is a big thing in our life. Make sure to make some art with your mom today. Maybe she's a CPA, maybe she doesn't like to do art. Send her some, because she'll appreciate it and it'll end up on the fridge, even if you're in your 60s, she'll love it anyway, because that's what moms do.
Between the three of y'all, which one is the best artist?
No, that's not true.
We're different.
Yes, it's all
We're all
entirely
different.
different.
Different strengths. I think she has a greater imagination than anybody. I'm kind of a renderer. I probably don't create anything from scratch, just out of my head. I have to have something to look at.
I do too.
I do too.
I have a really hard time just like,
What did you say?
I have a hard time just like doing that, like just creating
Pull
things.
it, yeah. And I think that's why abstract is hard for me, because I'm just so more rigidly minded that I have to see it.
Have you always been like that? Has it always been that the case, or is it?
Well, I think it's kind of
Or has
the
it
way
changed?
you grew up.
How have you changed with age from when you were younger to older? Your art, how's it changed?
I'm happier with it. And I think with any artist, you look back at what you've done and you're embarrassed to see.
Yes.
You don't want anybody to see the old stuff. And maybe there's a piece or two now that you're finally proud of, and you can see that. But I think being more willing to let people see what I do, and I can say I am an artist, whereas I do some art sometimes. Now I'm an artist.
You ever pull out the old pieces and think, wow, that was really pretty good?
Well, I do, in that, considering how little I knew,
Yeah.
then 'cause you can't help but go through life and not pick up tools you don't even realize will be tools, and you grow from that, and you can't take a workshop even though you walk out and say, well, you learn something, and you'll keep part of that with you. So it's cumulative over time. And some people, like little V over here, was born with a whole suitcase full of yummy information and talents and things that she already understood when she was born, I think, that others of us have had to learn over time.
Now, what grade are you in, V?
I'm a junior.
Junior in high school.
Yeah.
Do you tend to hang with artists, other artists, or how does that work? How does that dynamic work in high school?
I really don't know. Like the way high school is portrayed in literally everything is completely incorrect. Just throwing that out there.
How is it? In what way?
I don't know. It's just like the very typical like, ooh, people leaning up against the lockers and these big old cliques of people. Like, one, none of us touch our lockers. Two, that just kind of doesn't happen. Like, there's a lot of mini cliques, and my clique is very strange because there's a very wide array of like diversity in the types of people that we are.
So it's not an artist clique; it's a diverse clique with lots of different people in it.
Yeah, like politicians and people in theater and biology and all the stuff. So it's like very, very different. And I didn't even get to take an art class till this year because I was so like academics that I was like trying to get that all done. But I finally did get in my first art class. But then like it's Art 1, which everyone kind of has to take. So
Is it boring?
See, the thing about Art 1 is that, like, whoever is teaching it knows that everyone has to take it, so they're like, I'm going to make this as easy as possible for you.
Streamline it.
Yeah, so you don't have to try very hard. But I did try because I had time to try. And I made some pretty cool stuff, I think. And I know that I, like, like being forced to do art every single day actually did make me improve more than I thought it did. Because like after that, I'm like, oh wow, that skill is a lot easier to do now that I was doing it every single day. So, yeah.
Well, when I was 4, I got in deep trouble for being an artist.
Eh,
You remember that?
yeah, I
Tell
know
me
this
the
story.
I was doing the typical 4-year-old princes and princesses and kings and queens and fluffy horses, and on my little drawing pad that was that stiff, harsh paper that was available then for kids to draw on, very stiff stuff. Well, when I didn't like one of my pieces of work, I would want to dispose of it. So my method of disposal was I put it down the commode. And it didn't take very many failures to create a plumbing problem. So that's kind of my earliest memory of my artwork, was being flushed away.
Where did they get art supplies back then? Where did they buy?
Very limited, very limited. There was one store in town that had, we lived in Pennsylvania at that time, and there just wasn't much. Oil paints, crayons, what they called poster paints at that time, but not much else. There was no acrylic. Pastel came into my view later on in life, but it wasn't there at the beginning. Colored pencil was around.
What's a funny story about Julie?
Oh God, where do you start?
Oh, we've got a picture of that. She's about, 3-4 years old, sitting in the middle of the living room floor in her night clothes with her big sketchbook out in front of her, head down, hard at work,
With a cat in my lap.
with a cat to lap. Yep.
I remember being conscious of the first time I was actually trying to make something that looked like something. And I was probably about 9 years old, and Mom had an antique pump organ that was one of the bigger features in our house. It was so humongous, floor to ceiling kind of thing, and it had the foot bellows that you would operate and everything. It was extremely ornate, and I was like, I'm going to draw that. And not straight on, of course, I had to take it with some perspective and stuff like that. And I sat there for days with spindles and the keys and the whole deal, and I look at it now and go, oh Lord, 'cause, but when I think about the fact that was a 9-year-old and this is the first stab at any kind of perspective or anything, I tend to forgive myself because I'm kind of like, hey,
Yeah.
And then this one, she has always been kind of like more quiet and reserved and stuff like that. So I think her artwork, and she's an only child. So, in between reading tons of books, more books than I've ever read in my entire life, she draws a lot.
Well, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy
How about
Mother's
that?
Day.